My name's Huon Hooke, and this is The Real Review, and today we're talking with Andrew Quin, the chief winemaker of Hentley Farm in the Barossa Valley. And of course, Hentley Farm is one of our 2021 The Real Review top wineries of the year. So welcome, Andrew. Nice to have you on screen.
Thanks for having me.
Good, and I can see out the window there a bit of vineyard. Which part of the vineyard is that exactly?
So the block behind me is what we call D block, which the top 2/3 of goes into a wine that we do that it's called the Beast, which is one of our sort of more well-known wines, a big sort of, as the name suggests, a big classic sort of Western Barossa style.
Yeah, and I know there's a nice story behind those two wines, the Beauty and the Beast. It's all to do with different aspects, isn't it? The vines on different slopes.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got Greenock Creek that runs through the middle of our property and creates the sort of undulating slopes on the east and western sides of the creek. And the Beauty is a block that's down sort of in the banks of the creek, quite low in the gully where the cooler air settles. And that Shiraz sort of naturally produces more sort of softness of fruit, and more sort of, I guess, slaty characters and blue fruits, where the Beast is on the block just behind me here, up on the western hillside, where you see sort of slightly warmer temperatures, more consistent sunlight exposure, less topsoil as well. And so that block produces lower crops, smaller berries, and bigger, richer sort of flavours. And we sort of, through winemaking, look to really enhance those characters. So two wines grown, sort of 300 or 400 metres apart on the property, but two completely different styles.
Yeah, I suppose if you were an effete Pinot Noir sipper from down south, you'd probably say they're both beasts, but everything's relative, isn't it? They're both full-bodied words.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's a good point you raise. While we're all about these two wines being true sort of terroir stories, my view since taking over the winemaking here back in 2008 has been that to sort of use winemaking to really highlight the natural characteristics of those two blocks within the property. So the winemaker's not identical. We pick the Beauty a bit earlier, the Beast a bit later. We extract more tannin during ferment in the Beast than we do the Beauty.
The thing that always surprises me about Hentley Farm is that the vineyard is not very old, but you started producing terrifically statuesque wines very early in the piece, and probably right from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I talk a lot about Hentley Farm being a story about site selection, and Keith Henschke, who founded the place and is still the manager here at Hentley Farm, put a lot of time and effort back in the mid-90s talking to other winemakers, other viticulturists in the region, trying to find out what would be the best sub-region in the Barossa that I guess wasn't yet planted out. And they all talked about coming out towards Greenock Creek and looking for these red clay loam soils that everyone was that were already famous at the time through that sort of early to mid 90s period.
Yeah, I think you've already answered my first official question, which was if there's any one factor that explains the quality of the wines across the board, what would that be? I guess you'd say the dirt, would you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think any winemaker worth a pinch of salt knows that great wines are made in the vineyard, and it does come down to the quality of this little place. And yeah, it's the dirt. It's that red clay loam soil with limestone underneath, although not always limestone. We've got some variations there. There's bluestone in some areas as well. But I think it's also the diversity of the site that works really well for us. So the creek runs through the middle, and we've got those slopes on the eastern and western sides that create differences in aspects. So sunlight exposure, as I said before with the Beauty and Beast discussion, the temperatures change a little bit across the site. But then it comes back to the quality of the fruit, but also the quality of the tannins. I think those soils combined with the microclimate out here mean that we just get such beautifully ripe tannins early in the season.
Well, the next question is about your beginnings and your emergence as a winemaker. Was there a sort of lightbulb wine that turned you onto being a winemaker?
I don't know if there was one particular wine back then. I started studying horticulture, so my beginnings were studying horticulture, and I did that for a couple of years and was starting to wonder what I was going to do with that degree, and going sort of into my early 20s, and was starting to get an interest in wine at the time. I guess if there was a wine at the time, I grew up in Melbourne, and my dad and brother spent a lot of time going through Rutherglen and they love the Campbell's wines, Bobby Burns, and the Barclay de Riff from that winery were probably the things that I was exposed to at the time when I was deciding that wine seemed like a cool thing to do.
And of the wines that you make, what's your favourite? Do you have a favourite?
I hate that question, Huon. I get asked it a lot, and I always say that I think I answer it differently every time. But I think that there's probably 2 wines in the range that I think always feature a mention. The first one is the beauty that we were talking about, and I think that's because we do put a fair bit of technique and I guess winemaking into trying to achieve that sort of softer, more elegant style out of a vineyard that is, of course, probably more suited to the beast. So a lot of work goes into getting the beauty right, and I really enjoy that process. But the other one is a wine we do called H Block Shiraz Cabernet, which is also grown down in the creek diagonally across from the beauty block. And I love that wine because it's a quintessential example of that quintessential Australian blend, but it's kind of unique in that it's off the same little patch of dirt year in, year out. So we've got Cabernet and Shiraz in what we call H Block that grow side by side, and it always comes purely off that small selection.
So for a bit of light relief, do you occasionally broach a bottle of white wine?
Yeah, sure. We make a lot of Riesling, and I think Riesling is such an exciting grape variety and something that I love to drink a lot of. The other really, it's a bit of a curio, but we recently purchased a vineyard down in Mount Crawford.
Well, climatically and soil-wise, that'll be quite an alter ego for your property, won't it?
Absolutely, and I think that's why we're excited by it. It's a lot cooler down there. They get significantly more rainfall down there, and yeah, the soils are certainly sandier down that way. So yeah, there's a lot of variation.
Well, Andrew, I think we've run out of time, so I'll say thank you very much for joining us. Andrew Quin, Chief Winemaker, Hentley Farm, Barossa Valley, and obviously one of the wineries in the Real Review's top wineries of 2021. Thanks again, Andrew. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me, Huon. Cheers, mate.
Cheerio.